The moment I saw Barbara from the HOA blocking my driveway at 5 in the morning, I knew the biggest snowstorm of the winter was about to become my worst nightmare for reasons that had nothing to do with the weather. I had a business to run, and 15 clients counting on me to clear their properties before they opened at 8. But there she stood in her expensive purple coat, arms crossed, looking like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. I parked my personal truck and climbed out, already exhausted before the day had even started. The snow was coming down hard now, thick flakes that meant business. My plow truck sat in my driveway, ready to go, and I needed to be in it about 10 minutes ago. "Good morning, Barbara," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I need to get to work." "Mr. Jensen," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "we need to discuss your commercial vehicle situation." I felt my jaw clench. We had discussed this multiple times. I was Zach Jensen, and I had lived in this neighborhood in Maple Grove, Minnesota for 3 years. I owned a small snow removal business, and my plow truck was parked in my own driveway during winter months. This was not news to anyone. "Barbara, I really do not have time for this right now. I have clients waiting." Section 47B of the HOA bylaws clearly states that commercial vehicles over a certain weight class cannot be parked in residential driveways overnight, she recited like she had been practicing in front of a mirror. "I have received complaints." "From who?" I asked, even though I knew it was pointless. The complaints always came from Barbara herself or her 2 cronies on the board. "That is confidential," she said, pursing her lips. "The point is, you are in violation. I am going to have to write you up. Write me up." I looked at the falling snow, thinking about Mrs. Chen's restaurant that needed to be cleared, about the medical office complex, about all the promises I had made. "Barbara, we can talk about this later. People are counting on me." "This is later," she said. "I have been trying to address this with you for weeks. You have been ignoring my emails." "I responded to every single one," I said, my patience wearing thin. "My truck meets the weight requirements. I sent you the specifications. Twice. I had them reviewed by the board, and we disagree with your interpretation," Barbara said, stepping closer to my plow truck. "Until this is resolved, I cannot allow you to use this vehicle while it is in violation of HOA regulations." I stared at her. "You cannot be serious right now." "I am always serious about protecting our property values," she said. And then she did something I would not have believed if I had not seen it with my own eyes. She reached through my truck's open window and grabbed my keys out of the ignition. I had left it running to warm up, a stupid mistake that I was now paying for dearly. "Give those back," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous level. "These will be returned to you once you provide proof that this vehicle meets all HOA requirements and pay the outstanding fines for previous violations," Barbara said, clutching my keys to her chest like they were precious gems. "What fines? I have never been fined." "You will receive the paperwork in the mail," she said. "Good day, Mr. Jensen. I suggest you find alternative transportation for your work today." She turned and walked away, her boots crunching in the fresh snow, my keys in her hand. I stood there for a moment, genuinely shocked. I had dealt with difficult people before, had navigated plenty of unreasonable situations, but this was theft. Plain and simple theft. Then I remembered something, and I almost laughed. The spare set of keys was in my coat pocket. I had put them there 2 days ago when I had gotten the keys copied at the hardware store and just never bothered to put them on my key ring. I waited until Barbara disappeared into her house 3 doors down. Then I calmly reached into my heavy winter coat pocket and pulled out the spare keys. They jingled pleasantly, like little bells of justice. I climbed into my plow truck, shifted it into reverse, and headed out to do my job. The medical complex came first. Dr. Harrison's office opened at 7, and his parking lot was a mess. I spent 45 minutes clearing it, making sure the handicapped spots were perfectly accessible and the walkways were safe. The snow kept coming down, which was good for business but bad for staying on schedule. Mrs. Chen's restaurant was next. She came out with a thermos of coffee for me, bless her heart, and I cleared her lot and the street parking in front of her building. She had a lunch rush that could not be interrupted by snow, and I made sure she would not have to worry about it. I was on my 4th property when my phone rang. Barbara's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, and again. Finally, I answered. "Yes, Barbara." "How are you driving that truck?" she demanded, her voice shrill with rage. "I have your keys." "You have a set of keys," I corrected her. "They are not the only set in existence. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." "You are in violation of HOA rules," she practically screamed into the phone. "According to you," I said. "My lawyer might disagree. Speaking of which, you stole my property this morning. I would appreciate it if you would return those keys to my mailbox." "I did not steal anything. I confiscated prohibited items." "You are not a police officer, Barbara. You are a member of a homeowners association. You have no legal authority to confiscate anything. That is theft." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from the cold. The adrenaline was kicking in. I had finally stood up to her, and it felt amazing and terrifying at the same time. The rest of my morning went smoothly. I cleared all 15 properties, salted the necessary areas, and even helped a stranded motorist get their car unstuck from a snowbank. By the time I headed home around 2 in the afternoon, I was exhausted but satisfied. The snow had finally stopped, leaving Maple Grove under nearly 18 inches of fresh powder. As I turned onto my street, I saw 3 cars parked in front of my house. One was Barbara's silver SUV. The others I recognized as belonging to Patricia Whitmore and Susan Henderson, the other 2 members of the HOA board. This was not going to be good. They were standing in my driveway when I pulled up. Actually, they were not just standing there. They were blocking it. I stopped my truck in the street and climbed out. "Ladies," I said, "I need to park my truck." "We need to talk about your behavior this morning," Barbara said. Patricia and Susan flanked her like backup singers in the world's worst girl group. "My behavior?" I asked. "You mean the part where I went to work after you stole my property?" "I explained this already," Barbara said, her face reddening. "I confiscated items that were being used in violation of HOA bylaws. And I explained that you are not law enforcement," I said. "You committed theft. Now, I am going to ask you nicely one more time to return my keys and move out of my driveway." "We have called an emergency HOA meeting for tonight at 7, Patricia spoke up. She was a thin woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually pinched expression. "You are required to attend." "Am I?" I asked. "Or what?" "Or we will begin proceedings to place a lien on your property," Susan said. She was the youngest of the 3, probably in her early 40s, and always seemed to be trying to prove she belonged on the board. I took a deep breath. I was tired, cold, and running out of patience. "Fine. I will be there. Now move." They exchanged glances, then slowly stepped aside. I parked my truck in my driveway, right where it had been that morning, and headed into my house without another word to them. Inside, I made myself a sandwich and called my lawyer. His name was Tom Rodriguez, and he had helped me set up my LLC when I started my business. He was also familiar with HOA disputes, having dealt with several over the years. "Zach," he answered on the second ring. "How is business?" "Busy," I said, "but I have a problem." I explained the situation, including Barbara taking my keys. Tom was quiet for a moment. She physically took your keys from your vehicle. Yes. And she is refusing to return them. Yes, she says they are confiscated. That is theft, Tom said flatly. HOAs have authority over certain property issues, but they absolutely cannot take your personal property. Did you file a police report? I had not even thought of that. No. You should, Tom said. Document everything. Take photos of your truck, of the spec sheets showing it meets the weight requirements they mentioned. Forward me all the emails between you and Barbara. I want to see exactly what she has been claiming. There is an emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7, I said. Do not go alone, Tom advised. I will meet you there. Do not sign anything, do not agree to anything, just listen. Let me do the talking if it comes to that. I felt relief wash over me. Thanks, Tom. That is what you pay me for, he said. Send me the meeting details and those emails. I will see you tonight. After I hung up, I spent the next hour documenting everything. I took photos of my truck from every angle, including close-ups of the registration and weight specifications clearly displayed on the door. I printed out the email chains between Barbara and me, highlighting where I had provided the requested information and where she had simply ignored it or moved the goalposts. Then I did something I should have done that morning. I called the Maple Grove Police Department's non-emergency line and filed a report for theft. The officer who took my call was professional and sympathetic. So this HOA member took your keys from your vehicle without permission. Correct, I said. She claims she has the authority to confiscate them due to HOA violations, but my lawyer says that is not legal. Your lawyer is correct, the officer said. HOAs have civil authority over property use and violations, but they cannot take personal property. That would be theft. We will send an officer to take a formal statement. Officer Mike Patterson arrived about 30 minutes later. He was a younger guy, maybe early 30s, and he took detailed notes as I explained the situation. You have any witnesses? He asked. No, it was just me and Barbara in my driveway at 5 this morning, I said. But she has the keys. That proves she took them. She could claim you gave them to her, Officer Patterson said. I have the phone call records showing her calling me multiple times, angry that I was still driving my truck, I pointed out. Why would she be surprised I was using my truck if I had willingly given her my keys? Officer Patterson nodded. Good point. I will go speak with her. What is her address? I gave him Barbara's information and he headed out. I watched from my window as he walked up to her door. She answered quickly, and even from 3 houses away I could see her become animated, gesturing wildly. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before Officer Patterson returned to my house. She insists she has the legal right to hold your keys pending resolution of HOA violations, he said. I explained that she does not. She became quite upset and demanded to speak with my supervisor. Sounds about right, I muttered. Here is the thing, Officer Patterson continued. Technically, I could arrest her for theft right now. But given that this is an HOA dispute and you have spare keys, my supervisor suggested we let you and your lawyer handle this through civil channels first. If she does not return the keys after a demand letter from your attorney, then we can escalate. It was not what I wanted to hear, but it made sense. Fine, but you will put all of this in a report. Absolutely, he said. You will get a case number. Keep that for your records. After Officer Patterson left, I tried to rest before the meeting. I dozed off on the couch and woke up at 6:30, groggy and stiff. I made strong coffee, changed into clean clothes, and headed out to meet Tom at the community center where HOA meetings were held. The Maple Grove Estates Community Center was a modest building at the edge of our neighborhood. It had a main meeting room, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. The heating was always either too high or too low, and the chairs were uncomfortable. I had attended exactly 3 HOA meetings in my 3 years living here, and I had regretted all of them. Tom was waiting for me in the parking lot. He was a short, stocky man with graying hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from years of dealing with nonsense. "Ready?" he asked. "Not even a little bit," I admitted. "Good, keep that energy. Let them see you are taking this seriously, but do not lose your temper. That is what they want." We walked in together. The meeting room was arranged with a long table at the front where the board sat, and several rows of folding chairs facing them. About a dozen residents were already there, which was unusual. Most HOA meetings drew maybe 5 people on a good day. Barbara, Patricia, and Susan were at the front table, along with a 4th person I did not recognize. He was an older man in a suit, and he had a briefcase in front of him. "Who is that?" I whispered to Tom. "Probably their lawyer," Tom murmured back. "They are taking this seriously too." We sat in the front row. Barbara's eyes narrowed when she saw Tom, but she did not say anything. At precisely 7 o'clock, she called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Barbara began. "We have called this emergency meeting to address a serious and ongoing violation of our community bylaws by Mr. Zach Jensen." A few people turned to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. "Mr. Jensen operates a commercial snow removal business and has been parking his commercial vehicle in his residential driveway in direct violation of Section 47B of our bylaws." Barbara continued. "Despite multiple warnings and requests for documentation, he has refused to comply with board directives." "That is factually incorrect," Tom said calmly. "Mr. Jensen provided all requested documentation, including vehicle specifications proving his truck meets the weight requirements outlined in Section 47B. Do you have that documentation with you?" Barbara's face tightened. "The board reviewed the documentation and determined it was insufficient." "On what grounds?" Tom asked. The older man in the suit cleared his throat. "My name is Richard Kowalski. I represent the HOA board. The board has the authority to interpret bylaws and make determinations regarding compliance." "Within reason," Tom countered. "They cannot arbitrarily reject documentation that clearly proves compliance." "May I see the specific language of Section 47B? Susan slid a packet of papers across the table. Tom took them and scanned quickly, then passed them to me. I read the relevant section. "Commercial vehicles exceeding a gross vehicle weight rating of 12,000 pounds shall not be parked in residential driveways overnight," I read aloud. "My truck has a GVWR of 10,500 pounds. I provided documentation of this to the board on November 15th and again on December 3rd. "The board disputes those specifications," Barbara said. "On what basis?" Tom asked again. "Did you have the vehicle independently inspected?" Silence. "Did you consult with an automotive expert?" Tom pressed. More silence. "So you are arbitrarily rejecting documentation from the vehicle manufacturer because—" Tom let the question hang. Richard Kowalski shifted uncomfortably. "The board has concerns about the safety and aesthetic impact of commercial vehicles in residential areas." "Then change your bylaws," Tom said. "But you cannot enforce rules that do not exist. The current bylaw has a specific weight threshold, and my client's vehicle is below that threshold. End of discussion." "There is also the matter of Mr. Jensen's insubordination this morning," Barbara interjected, her voice rising. "I confiscated his vehicle keys due to the violation, and he used a spare set to operate the vehicle anyway. This shows a flagrant disregard for board authority. You stole his property, Tom said flatly. You had no legal right to take his keys. A police report has been filed. The room erupted in murmurs. Several residents were whispering to each other, and I could see surprise and interest on their faces. I did not steal anything. Barbara insisted, her face now bright red. I was enforcing HOA regulations. By taking someone's personal property without their consent, Tom said. That is the definition of theft, Mrs. Mitchell. I have a demand letter here for the return of those keys within 24 hours, or we will pursue both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit for theft, harassment, and abuse of authority. He slid a document across the table. Richard Kowalski picked it up and read it, his expression growing more troubled with each line. Furthermore, Tom continued, my client has complied with all HOA regulations. He has provided documentation proving compliance. Your board has no grounds to fine him, place a lien on his property, or take any punitive action whatsoever. If you proceed with any such action, we will file suit against the HOA and the individual board members for harassment and exceeding your authority. You cannot sue us personally, Susan said, her voice shaking slightly. We are protected. Board members are protected from personal liability when acting in good faith within their authority, Tom explained. Taking personal property is not within your authority. Harassing a homeowner who has proven compliance is not acting in good faith. That protection does not apply here. Richard Kowalski leaned over and whispered urgently to Barbara and the other board members. The conversation lasted several minutes while the rest of us waited. Finally, Barbara sat back up, looking like she had bitten into something sour. The board will take this matter under advisement, she said stiffly. No, Tom said. We need a resolution tonight. Either acknowledge that Mr. Jensen is in compliance and return his property, or we file suit tomorrow morning. Your choice. I could see the internal struggle on Barbara's face. She wanted to fight this, wanted to maintain her authority, but the legal reality was clearly not in her favor. Fine, she finally spat out. The board acknowledges that Mr. Jensen's vehicle meets the weight requirements of Section 47B. And you will return his keys tonight, Tom prompted. Barbara opened her purse and pulled out my keys, slamming them on the table. There. Thank you, I said, standing up and retrieving them. They felt heavier in my hand than they should have, weighted with the entire ridiculous conflict. However, Barbara said, a mean glint in her eye, there is still the matter of Section 52C, which addresses the aesthetic standards for vehicles visible from the street. Your truck, with its Plow attachment and business logo, violates our community standards. Tom smiled, which was never a good sign for the other side. Section 52C applies to inoperable vehicles, vehicles in disrepair, or vehicles being used for advertising purposes. Mr. Jensen's truck is not inoperable, is not in disrepair, and the logo is company identification, not advertising. He is not running a used car lot out of his driveway. The Plow attachment is unsightly, Patricia chimed in. It is also seasonal equipment necessary for his livelihood, Tom replied. You cannot ban tools of a trade that are legally parked on private property. I assume you do not cite homeowners for having landscaping equipment visible in their yards. That is different, Barbara insisted. How? Tom asked. Please explain the legal difference between a homeowner who owns a landscaping company parking his trailer in his driveway and my client parking his truck in his driveway. No one had an answer for that. I thought so, Tom said. Now, unless there are any other imaginary violations you would like to discuss, I think we are done here." We stood to leave, but Barbara was not finished. "Mr. Jensen, you should know that the board will be watching you very carefully. Any violation, no matter how small, will be addressed immediately." "That sounds like harassment," Tom said pleasantly. "I would be careful about making threats like that in front of witnesses, Mrs. Mitchell." We walked out of the community center into the cold night air. I felt like I could finally breathe again. "That went better than expected," Tom said. "Really, because I feel like I just poked an angry bear." "You did," Tom agreed. "But the bear does not have the law on her side. Keep documenting everything. Every email, every interaction, every complaint. If she continues to harass you, we will have grounds for a restraining order." "It should not be this hard to just live in my own house and do my job," I said. "No, it should not," Tom agreed. "But some people get a tiny bit of power and lose their minds. Barbara is one of those people. The good news is that she showed her hand tonight. She has nothing. Your truck is legal, you are in compliance, and she committed theft. She is going to back off now." I wanted to believe him. I really did. The next few days were quiet. I did not hear from Barbara or see her around the neighborhood. The snow continued intermittently, keeping me busy with my clients. Everything seemed to be settling down. Then I got a call from my neighbor, Amy Henderson. She lived 2 doors down from me and had always been friendly, even though her mother Susan was on the HOA board. "Zach, I thought you should know something," she said, her voice low. "My mom was on the phone with Barbara last night. They are planning to call another meeting to try to amend the bylaws to ban commercial vehicles entirely." My heart sank. "Can they do that?" "I do not know," Amy said, "but I heard them talking about it. They sounded pretty determined. I just thought you should have a heads up." "Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it." I called Tom immediately and relayed the information. He sighed. "They can try. Amending HOA bylaws requires a vote of the homeowners, though. They cannot just do it themselves. Check your HOA documents for the specific requirements." I dug out my HOA paperwork and found the section on amendments. Any change to the bylaws required a vote of at least 75% of homeowners, with a quorum of at least 50% of homes represented. There were 142 homes in our neighborhood, which meant they needed at least 71 homeowners to vote, and at least 54 of those votes had to be in favor. That seemed unlikely, but I could not take chances. I spent that evening drafting a letter to all my neighbors explaining the situation. I kept it factual and straightforward. The current bylaws already regulated commercial vehicles with reasonable restrictions. I was in full compliance with those restrictions, and changing the bylaws to ban them entirely would set a precedent for the HOA to interfere with residents' livelihoods. I printed 141 copies and spent the next morning delivering them to every house in the neighborhood except Barbara's. Several neighbors stopped me to chat, and I was surprised by how supportive most of them were. "Barbara has been a nightmare," one man told me. "Last year she tried to fine me because my garbage cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. They were in my garage with the door open while I was cleaning them. She sent us a violation notice because our Christmas lights were the wrong color," a woman said. "Apparently only white lights are acceptable. We had multicolored ones. We have lived here for 15 years and never had a problem before." The stories went on. It seemed Barbara had made enemies all over the neighborhood, but people were afraid to stand up to her because they did not want the hassle. "That is what she counts on," I told them. "She makes it so difficult that people just give in, but we do not have to." By the end of the day, I had talked to probably 30 neighbors, and every single one promised to vote against any bylaw changes targeting commercial vehicles. The official notice of a special meeting came 2 days later. It was scheduled for the following week, and the agenda clearly stated that proposed amendments to Sections 47B and 52C would be voted on. Tom and I prepared carefully. We drafted our own amendments, ones that would actually protect homeowners from arbitrary enforcement while still maintaining reasonable community standards. We also prepared a presentation showing exactly what Barbara had done and why her proposed changes were harmful. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. I had never seen so many people at an HOA meeting. There must have been 80 or 90 residents there, far more than the usual 5 or 6. Barbara looked shocked when she walked in and saw the crowd. Patricia and Susan looked nervous. Richard Kowalski, their lawyer, was there again too. "Well," Barbara said, calling the meeting to order, "I see we have quite a turnout tonight. That is wonderful. Shows real community engagement." She went through the standard opening procedures, then got to the main agenda item. "As you all know, we have had ongoing issues with commercial vehicles in our neighborhood," she began. "These vehicles are unsightly, they lower property values, and they create safety concerns. The board is proposing an amendment to ban all commercial vehicles from being parked in residential driveways or visible from the street." "That is not what the proposal says," Tom called out. He was sitting next to me in the front row again. "May I see the exact language?" Barbara reluctantly handed over a copy of the proposed amendment. Tom read it and shook his head. "This would ban any vehicle with a commercial logo, any vehicle over 6,000 pounds, and any vehicle with aftermarket equipment," he said. "That includes pickup trucks with toolboxes, SUVs, any vehicle with a company name on it. This would affect dozens of residents." "That is the point," Barbara said. "We want to maintain our neighborhood's character." "By preventing people from earning a living?" Tom asked. "How many people here drive a vehicle with their company name on it? Raise your hands." About 15 hands went up. Barbara's face paled slightly. "How many people here drive a vehicle over 6,000 pounds? That includes most full-size pickup trucks and large SUVs." At least 30 more hands went up. "So you are proposing a rule that would affect roughly a third of the neighborhood," Tom said. "Interesting. We would grandfather in existing vehicles," Barbara said quickly. "That is not in the amendment language," Tom pointed out. "And even if it were, that would create an enforcement nightmare. No, what this really is a targeted attack on my client because Mrs. Mitchell does not like him." "That is not true," Barbara protested. "Then why did this proposal only come up after Mr. Jensen successfully defended himself against your unfounded violations?" Tom asked. "Why are you suddenly concerned about commercial vehicles when they have been allowed in this neighborhood for years?" A man in the back stood up. I recognized him as Dale Preston, who owned a plumbing company. "I have been parking my work van in my driveway for 8 years. Never had a single complaint until last week when I got a letter from the board saying I might be in violation of new rules." "Same here," another woman said. "I am a real estate agent. My car has my name and company on it. I got a letter too." More people started speaking up, and I realized Barbara had made a critical error. In her zeal to target me, she had threatened a large portion of the neighborhood. People who might not have cared about my situation were suddenly very invested because they were affected too. Barbara tried to regain control of the meeting, but it was too late. The room was buzzing with angry conversations. Finally, Tom stood up. "I would like to make an alternative proposal," he said loudly. Everyone quieted down. "Instead of banning commercial vehicles, what if we clarify the existing rules to make them more fair and enforceable? Mr. Jensen and I have drafted an amendment that would keep the weight limits, but add specific definitions. Require the board to respond to documentation within a specific time frame, and create an appeals process for disputed violations. This way, homeowners can still use their vehicles for work while maintaining community standards. Second, Dale Preston called out immediately. Barbara looked like she wanted to argue, but Richard Kowalski leaned over and whispered to her. She listened, her jaw clenching tighter and tighter, then finally nodded. "Fine," she said. "We will table our proposal and review the alternative." "Why table it?" someone called out. "Let us vote now. I want this settled." There was a general murmur of agreement. Barbara looked trapped. "All those in favor of tabling the board's proposal and considering the alternative amendment, raise your hands," Tom said. Nearly every hand in the room went up. Opposed, just Barbara, Patricia, and Susan raised their hands. "The motion passes," Tom said. "Now, let us discuss the alternative amendment." We spent the next hour going through the proposed changes. They were reasonable and clear. Commercial vehicles under 12,000 pounds were allowed. Logos had to be non-illuminated and under a certain size. Equipment had to be maintained in good condition. And the board had to provide written justification for any violations within 10 business days, with an appeals process if the homeowner disagreed. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. Only Barbara, Patricia, and Susan voted against it. As the meeting wrapped up, several residents came up to thank me for standing up to the board. "Someone needed to push back," one man said. "Barbara has gotten away with too much for too long." Amy Henderson approached me as I was leaving. "I am sorry about my mom," she said quietly. "She means well, but she gets caught up in things." "It is not your fault," I assured her. "I know, but still. Thank you for handling this the right way. A lot of people would have just moved." "I thought about it," I admitted. "But I like my house. I like this neighborhood. I should not have to leave because one person decided to make my life difficult." As Tom and I walked to our cars, he clapped me on the shoulder. "That was a good result. The new amendment actually makes things better for everyone." "Barbara is going to hate me forever," I said. "Probably," Tom agreed. "But there is not much she can do about it now. Just keep your nose clean and do not give her any legitimate ammunition." I wish I could say that was the end of it. I really do. But Barbara was not the type to let things go. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the city zoning department. Someone had filed a complaint that I was running a commercial business out of my residential property. The letter requested documentation of my business license, proof that I was not storing commercial quantities of materials on site, and verification that I was not receiving commercial deliveries or conducting business meetings at my residence. It was clearly Barbara's doing. I called Tom, who advised me to respond promptly with all requested documentation. My business license listed a post office box as the business address. I kept all my equipment and materials in a rented storage unit across town, and I certainly was not holding meetings at my house. I gathered everything and submitted it to the zoning department. The inspector who came out was apologetic. "We have to follow up on complaints," he said. "But it is pretty obvious you are not running a business from your home. Your truck is parked here, but that is it. You are fine." The complaint was dismissed, but it had wasted hours of my time and added stress I did not need. Then my homeowner's insurance sent me a letter asking about my commercial vehicle and whether I needed additional coverage. Someone had apparently contacted them suggesting I was using my residential property for commercial purposes. Then the Postal Service held my mail for a week because someone reported that I had moved and needed a forwarding address. Each incident individually was minor, but together they formed a clear pattern of harassment. Barbara could not get me through the HOA anymore, so she was trying other avenues. I documented everything and sent it all to Tom. "This is getting ridiculous," I told him. "It is also illegal," he said. Filing false reports, interfering with someone's mail, harassment. She is crossing lines. I think it is time we pursue that restraining order. We filed a petition for a harassment restraining order, detailing every incident from the stolen keys to the fraudulent complaints. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I installed security cameras on my property. I put them on all 4 corners of my house, covering my driveway, front door, backyard, and both sides. If Barbara was going to keep this up, I wanted video evidence. It turned out to be a very good decision. One night around 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the cameras. I pulled up the app and saw a figure in dark clothing approaching my Plow truck. At first I thought it might be a thief, but as they got closer to the camera, I recognized Barbara's distinctive purple coat. I watched in disbelief as she walked around my truck, examining it carefully, then took out her phone and started taking pictures. She was being systematic about it, photographing every angle, every bit of equipment, the license plate, everything. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She pulled out a screwdriver and started scratching the paint on my truck's door, right through my business logo. I was out of bed and calling 911 before I even fully processed what I was seeing. "Someone is vandalizing my vehicle right now," I told the dispatcher, giving my address. "I have them on camera." "Are they still there?" the dispatcher asked. I checked the feed. Barbara had moved to the side of the truck and was now keying a long scratch along the bed. "Yes, they are still here. Officers are on the way. Stay inside the house. Do not confront them." It was the longest 4 minutes of my life, watching Barbara methodically damage my truck while I waited for the police. She had just started on the other side when red and blue lights lit up the street. Barbara froze like a deer in headlights. 2 officers got out of their patrol car, hands on their belts. "Step away from the vehicle," one of them commanded. Barbara dropped the screwdriver. "I can explain," she said, her voice carrying in the quiet night air. "Stay right there," the officer said. His partner approached Barbara while he walked toward my front door. I opened it before he could knock. "Mr. Jensen?" he asked. I recognized him as Officer Patterson, who had taken my theft report weeks ago. "That is me," I said. "She is on camera vandalizing my truck. Can you show me?" I pulled up the footage on my phone and showed him. His expression hardened as he watched. "That is pretty clear," he said. "Do you want to press charges?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. Officer Patterson walked back to his partner and they spoke quietly for a moment. Then they walked Barbara to the patrol car and placed her in handcuffs. She was talking rapidly, protesting, but the officers were not listening. One of them came back to speak with me while the other stayed with Barbara. "We are arresting her for criminal damage to property. You will need to file a formal report and provide copies of that video footage." "Not a problem," I said. "You know why she would do this?" the officer asked. "We have had an ongoing dispute through the HOA," I explained. "It has escalated. I actually have a hearing scheduled for a harassment restraining order in a few weeks. You will probably get it after this," the officer said. "Make sure you bring all of this to that hearing." I watched as they drove away with Barbara in the back seat. I felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion and sadness that it had come to this. The next morning I got a call from Richard Kowalski, the HOA's lawyer. "Mr. Jensen, I heard about what happened last night. On behalf of the HOA board, I want to apologize and assure you that Mrs. Mitchell's actions do not represent the organization." "She is the HOA president," I pointed out. "Not anymore," Richard said. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning. She has been removed from her position, effective immediately. The board is also offering to pay for the repairs to your vehicle." I was surprised by that. Who is replacing her? Patricia Whitmore will serve as interim president until the next regular election, Richard said. I understand that Mrs. Whitmore has also been problematic, but she is at least willing to follow legal advice. This situation has exposed the board to significant liability, and they are taking it seriously now. I appreciate that, I said, but I am still pursuing the restraining order. Completely understandable, Richard said. For what it is worth, I think you should. Mrs. Mitchell needs to understand that there are consequences for this behavior. I got my truck repaired, with the HOA cutting the check directly to the body shop. The damage was not as bad as it looked initially, mostly surface scratches that buffed out, though the logo had to be repainted. The restraining order hearing was almost anticlimactic after everything that had happened. Barbara showed up with her own lawyer, but there was not much they could argue against. We had documentation of every harassing incident, video footage of the vandalism, police reports, and testimony from multiple neighbors about Barbara's behavior. The judge granted a 2-year restraining order prohibiting Barbara from contacting me or coming within 100 feet of my property. He also strongly suggested that Barbara seek counseling for her behavior. Mrs. Mitchell, I have reviewed this entire case, the judge said sternly. What started as a possible legitimate HOA dispute escalated into theft, harassment, filing false reports with multiple government agencies, and ultimately criminal vandalism. This pattern of behavior is concerning and unacceptable. If you violate this restraining order, you will face criminal charges. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Barbara said quietly. It was the first time I had seen her looking genuinely subdued. The criminal case for the vandalism took longer. Barbara eventually pleaded guilty to misdemeanor criminal damage to property and was sentenced to 1 year of probation, community service, and restitution for the full cost of repairs, even though the HOA had paid for it. She also had to attend anger management classes. Life gradually returned to normal after that. Patricia turned out to be a much more reasonable HOA president. She was not perfect, but she at least understood the limits of her authority and was willing to work with residents instead of against them. The new bylaws amendment we had passed worked well. Disputes were handled through the proper appeals process, and the board was much more careful about enforcement. I ran into Amy Henderson at the grocery store a few months later. "How is your mom doing?" I asked, since Susan was still on the board. "She is okay," Amy said. "She learned a lesson from all this. She told me she got caught up in Barbara's energy and lost sight of what was reasonable. She almost voted to resign from the board but decided to stay and try to do better." "Good for her," I said, and I meant it. "And Barbara," Amy hesitated. "She and her husband are selling their house. They are moving to Florida." I did not know what to say to that. Part of me felt bad, but mostly I just felt relief. Probably for the best. Probably, Amy agreed. As winter turned to spring and the snow finally melted for good, I reflected on the entire ordeal. It had been exhausting and frustrating, but I had stood my ground and won. More importantly, the neighborhood was better for it. The new rules protected everyone's rights while still maintaining community standards. My business had actually grown through all of it. Several of my neighbors had hired me after seeing how I handled the situation, and word of mouth brought in new clients from surrounding areas. Apparently, the guy who stood up to his HOA was a good reputation to have. Tom and I met for coffee one afternoon to celebrate the end of the case. "You know what the funny part is," he said. "All of this happened because you had a spare set of keys in your coat pocket." I laughed. If I had not had those spares, I probably would have missed my appointments that morning, lost clients, and maybe just given in to her demands. Instead, you fought back and changed the entire system, Tom said. Sometimes small things make a big difference. I just wanted to do my job, I said. That is usually how it starts, Tom replied. Someone just trying to live their life and some petty tyrant decides to make it their problem. You could have moved, you could have given up, you could have let her win. I thought about it, I admitted. More than once, but you did not. And now, 141 other families benefit from the rules you helped establish. I had not thought about it that way, but he was right. The changes we made would protect future residents from the kind of harassment I had experienced. A few weeks after Barbara moved away, the HOA held its regular annual election. Patricia ran for president unopposed, but several new people joined the board, including Dale Preston with the plumbing business. The new board's first action was to establish clear procedures for handling violations, including mandatory mediation before any fines could be assessed. They also set up a community suggestion box and started holding quarterly open forums where residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. It was not perfect, but it was a dramatic improvement. One evening in early June, I was washing my truck in the driveway when a young couple walking by stopped to admire it. "Nice rig," the man said. "You do snow removal?" "I do," I said. "Also landscaping in the summer, general property maintenance." "We just bought a house a few streets over," the woman said. "Can we get your card?" I gave them one of my business cards. "Congratulations on the new house." "Thanks," the man said. "We almost did not buy in this neighborhood because we heard the HOA was nightmare. But then we heard they made a lot of changes recently." "They did," I confirmed. "It is a good place to live now." After they left, I thought about how close I had come to being driven out of my own home by one person's unreasonable behavior. It reminded me that communities are what we make them, and sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Check the county court records. Barbara violated her restraining order." I pulled up the records on my phone. Sure enough, Barbara had been charged with violating the restraining order after she apparently drove past my house multiple times in one day before she moved. A neighbor had reported it, and my security cameras had caught it. The violation had added another 6 months to her probation and resulted in a fine. I felt a mix of emotions about that. On one hand, she had brought it on herself by refusing to just leave me alone. On the other hand, it was sad that someone could become so fixated on something so petty that they would risk legal consequences. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful for the spare keys that had been in my coat pocket that morning. Grateful for Tom's legal help. Grateful for neighbors who had stood up with me. And grateful that I had chosen to fight instead of flee. The sun was setting as I finished washing my truck, casting long shadows across my driveway. My driveway on my property, where my truck was legally parked in full compliance with all rules and regulations. It should not have been something I had to fight for, but I was glad I had. As I coiled up the hose and headed inside, I saw Patricia Whitmore walking her dog down the street. She waved, and I waved back. It was a small gesture, but it represented how much things had changed. We were not friends exactly, but we were no longer adversaries. We were just neighbors, coexisting peacefully in a community that finally had fair rules and reasonable enforcement. That night, I got an email from the new HOA board. They were proposing a community cleanup day and asking for volunteers. I thought about it for a moment, then signed up. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because this was my community now, one that I had helped shape into something better. The final court date for Barbara's probation violation was on a Tuesday in July. I did not attend, having no desire to see her again, but Tom went to observe and sent me updates. The judge was not pleased with her continuing behavior and extended her probation another full year, with strict conditions including continued counseling. She looked defeated, Tom told me afterward over the phone. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, I asked. Almost, he confirmed. But then I remembered all the stress she put you through, all the time and money wasted, and the feeling passed. I understood what he meant. There was a difference between justice and cruelty, and I did not take any pleasure in seeing Barbara's life disrupted. But there had to be consequences for behavior like hers, or nothing would ever change. As summer progressed, my business flourished. I expanded my services and hired 2 part-time employees to help with the workload. My truck, freshly painted and proudly displaying my business logo, sat in my driveway every night without incident. The HOA never bothered me again. The new procedures worked exactly as intended, handling minor issues through friendly communication and saving the formal process for genuine problems. It turned out that when you treated people with respect and gave them a fair process, most disputes could be resolved without drama. In August, I attended my first HOA meeting since the restraining order hearing. The community center was comfortably full but not packed like it had been during the amendment vote. Patricia ran an efficient meeting, covering routine maintenance issues and budget items without any of the power tripping that had characterized Barbara's tenure. When the floor opened for resident comments, an older woman I did not know well stood up. "I just want to say thank you to the new board for how much better things are running. And I want to thank Zach Jensen for having the courage to stand up for all of us when things were bad." There was a round of applause, and I felt my face flush. I had not expected public acknowledgement, and I was not entirely comfortable with it. "You made it possible for the rest of us to feel safe speaking up," she continued. "That matters." After the meeting, several residents came up to chat, and I realized that I had inadvertently become part of the neighborhood in a way I had not been before. Prior to the conflict with Barbara, I had been friendly but somewhat isolated, focused on my business and keeping to myself. Now I knew my neighbors, they knew me, and we had been through something together. As fall approached and I began preparing for another snow removal season, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. I had a thriving business, a supportive community, and hard-won peace of mind. The spare keys in my coat pocket that morning had been more than just a backup. They had been the catalyst for standing up to injustice and creating positive change. My truck sat in the driveway, ready for the winter ahead, its presence no longer a source of conflict but simply a tool for earning an honest living. And that, more than anything else, felt like victory.